Well, this is going to be a lot of text here. You're going to, I don't know, 70 pages or something like that. But um, so try to simplify it a little bit. You only have a few storylines here. One of them is the people who really are on the trail definitely are doing their research. So we have the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, Jim Curran, and you also have the background of money, but they're doing their work. They're looking it over, they're finding hints, what's going on, how many people have come down with the disease. Sandra Ford's on it, Jim Curran's on it. They're trying to eliminate. Is it poppers? Is it a virus? They just don't know. That is it something in the environment or is it something else? And along the way, there always is going to be this blowback where nothing's going to happen quickly enough. Money won't be there, the interest won't be there. But you get some good stuff for the groundwork they did. Mary Guinan in New York, very cool stuff. And she's just being an investigator. She's getting closer and closer to the mark. What's going on? Who's getting sick? Larry Kramer, that crazy hospital visit, or rather doctor's office visit we talked about in class on Wednesday. This is how the virus intersects an individual. It's an amazing little visit here. So that's another part of the story, is that for non-professionals, the virus is closing in on their lives as well. And then we're back at the National Cancer Institute, this cell sorting thing. It sounds sort of like, oh, what a cool machine. But then there's a real frightening finding when they go to test it on the streets of Washington. And again, the virus is, we don't know what it is yet, but looking back, we do. And there's all this evidence of what HIV can do. But they don't know it yet. They don't know what the virus is. They don't know if it is a virus. And then there's more and more research from the CDC, a lot of what did poppers have to do with it. Different patients, Gate and Dugas again. And it's just, the plot gets thicker, but they start seeing the pattern. And then you also get the overall stats that it's happening more and more frequently. So again, you got one of the basic stories is the investigators saying, what is it? And at the same time, the disease is just pressing more and more. More and more people are coming sick. Larry Kramer, as we just read, going into the office, doctor's office, meets somebody, going in the out of the office, meets another. Two people with Kaposi's sarcoma. So the wagons are circling. This thing is really getting worse. And a little bit of background into pretty prominent figures, Gary Walsh and Joe Brewer, a local psychiatrist. And it's kind of the old thing about, what kind of sex works, the just for physical pleasure or more of a romantic connection. So they're going to go back and forth on that a little bit. And just, more of a personal story, putting a face on it, getting a sense of the different sensibilities gay people had back then. And so that'll be another angle too. It's just trying to flesh out the heart and soul of the people. And then at the same time, here the kind of half-hearted attempts of the newspapers to cover it, in this case a gay newspaper. Nobody's really doing much about it. Larry Kramer, back at it again. A meeting at his apartment. Let's really get some fundraising going. The government's not doing anything, so people are having private fundraisers to do something about this disease. And then back to their first fundraiser. Incredibly disappointing. $124. Nobody gives a rip. And that's the story. Nobody cares yet, trying to get them to care. Off to the National Institutes of Health, trying to get them to pay attention. It's a beautiful place with millions and billions of dollars, and they just kind of brush it off. This is very important stuff. And And then we're getting closer and closer. Here's another fascinating story about blood transfusion. And then Mary Gwynnon back in the Tenderloin trying to figure it out, interviewing more and more patients. Mary Gwynnon back in Atlanta. She's one of the chief investigators, really trying to get to the bottom of it. And then, one of the doctors who really has his ear to the ground, Dr. Conant, won a powerfully sick patient who was actually from Hayward. So again, that's another thread. We've got another patient. We've got a doctor who really knows what he's doing. You've got a profile of one of the earlier patients. And then back out again to another study, and really interesting stuff here. And then again, patients getting very sick, Ken Horn dying. So we keep moving around and around and around, and we're going between individual faces to trying to get money from the federal government. And now we bring in the French and how they're seeing the disease, a little bit different than the Americans, well worth noting. And then, the disease spreads further with Dr. Ari Rubinstein. It's just insinuating itself deeper and deeper into society. And that's really what the book is going to be about. It's going to mix, here we have Selma Dreetz, really terrific, investigator. And then we have some of the first doctors. And then we're back to Jim Curran, CDC. And all these people are trying to figure out what's going on with it. And of course, Don Francis, who is years ahead of everybody with his wildly well-informed guess. And then one of the, famous early AIDS patients, Bobby Campbell. I remember reading about him. God, that's almost 40 years ago. So all this stuff is starting to take life. The disease is showing up more. You get individual stories. You get stories from people who are trying to make a difference, trying to raise money. And then you get the CDC people going on television. More and more, the disease is affecting more people. They're getting a lot more evidence, but nobody knows quite what it is. And so that's what you're going to do. Everybody's circling around it. Some people in Denmark, what can we find out? Back into Los Angeles. And then a beautiful title, The Gathering Darkness, is that it really starts getting more and more frightening. Really more frightening. And it spreads deeper. Now we've got hemophiliacs. What's going on there? You might remember that Mary Gwynnon guessed that months ago. And blood transfusion as well. So it's spreading. It's looking more and more like something that's spread through the blood, that is a virus. And then we have Gret Rask's friend, Ib Bieberg. I can't say his name, I'm sorry, I'll try again. And again, he's hot on the trail. And then back to Paris, they're hot on the trail. Nobody has it yet. That is, nobody's found it, I should say that. And so we're kind of moving around back and forth all around with Don Francis again. And he's totally right, but he can't get any funding. And so you're just going to kind of keep that up. You got people who are totally on the trail. They know exactly what's going on, though they don't have any proof, but they can't get funding. They can't get any support. And then Larry Kramer, we've got to make a difference. We've got to make a difference. And so they have another big fundraiser, and this one will be quite successful. People trying to make a difference in San Francisco. Marcus Conant, one of the early leaders, really ahead of everybody else there. Really right on the trail, and nobody's listening to him. Nobody's doing anything. And that's really the frustration, and that's really the shape of this between the doctors like Joel Weissman, Marcus Conant, and the researchers, that is the Center for Disease Control folks. They're getting closer and closer and closer, but there just is no response, not in the media, not with the government. So it's a very frustrating time. Back to Don Francis, etc., Selma Dreetz. And so you're going to get a mixture of investigators, personal stories, a little bit of media response, always disappointing, and then more and more patience, a little bit more organization in San Francisco. And now we get close into Patient Zero, which is a misnomer, but more about Gayton Dugas. And of course, here more on Don Francis as well. But this is a study. This is how they really got close to thinking we're going to spend a lot of time with this, on how this is very likely a sexually transmitted disease. One of the most famous scenes of the book here, Auerbach and others in Darrow in Los Angeles, you got to have that. It's one of the most exciting moments in trying to connect this thing, trying to see if it's spread, who has it. Then we're back into Dritz. So the pattern's coming out. It looks closer and closer, more and more like a sexually transmitted disease. They know it, but then they can't convince anybody else about it. So they go crazy about it. It's a very frustrating time for those few people who are in the know, and at the same time, nobody else wants to listen to them. So that's always going to be part of the drama. And it really is. It's a story about just a small group of people growing slowly but surely who know that there's a disaster looming and nobody wants to listen to them. And that's really the larger story. Really, really the larger story. A little bit of political conflict there too. And so this is what these 70, 80 pages are going to be about. And just try to look at it. It's simple. Simple story. Some people, researchers, doctors, are really hot on the trail. Some people are caught up in the mix of it. Some people are trying to do something about it. And, it's a mixture of people getting insights and also people being enormously frustrated trying to get to the bottom of this thing. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope you read it more like a mystery book. Like, are they getting it? What are their frustrations? How come nobody's listening to them? That's what you really want to do. Marcus Conant meeting Gayton Dugas. We're into April of 1982. Now we've got 300 and 119 dead, pardon me. First fundraiser, hallelujah, we got a good one there. And that's really, kind of an exciting thing. Something's starting to work a little bit. And again, kind of wrapping the book together now. Now we know why you open with the Bicentennial Memories. That is New York City, 4th of July, 1976. Now we get it. Starting to come together here. So he didn't just have that for no reason at all. Michael Maletta will explain why 4th of July is so important. And that's the nice thing about the book, is it kind of wraps back some of the things you may have had questions about earlier. Now they start making sense. So it's really kind of, and more frustration with fundraising. That's always going to be the case. No federal money, just everybody saying we don't want to have anything to do with it. And at the same time, this growing urgency and sense of despair. So anyway, enjoy the threads of it. Enjoy the personal stories, the first patients, the people who really get it and their frustrations. And of course, it's a big and worthwhile drama. This thing will take tens of millions of people's lives. So I think every time you follow these threads, I think it'll give you some insight into how we human beings how and why we aren't up to these big struggles. So I hope you enjoy this, and we'll see you next Wednesday.